Combined budget hearings. We'll start with the pledge and then we'll get going. Mr. DeWitt, can you lead us?
Of course. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, on tonight's schedule we have, and we'll start off with retiree benefits, and then we'll go to active employee benefits, into human resources, legal, unemployment compensation, and then contingency, which will put us into executive session. Okay, any questions from the board? Then let's start with retiree benefits. We have Mr. Tim Royer here from H&H, as he is every year, but I understand this may be or is your last year.
That is correct. So I have a colleague with me, Mr. Bill Willicott, and we'll go through the presentation, and then Bill can give you an introduction at that time, give you a little bit of his background.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so hopefully you all have a presentation.
It's not on the agenda, though. I'd like to keep these meetings short.
Okay. Bill is very brief. All right. So as we always do, same format. Digging right in here to page 2 gives you an outline. I will let you know that this, as we do, for this meeting, it is just a reminder we're in an odd year. Pension values are done every year, but OPEB valuations are only done on the even year. We have a one-page insert in the back that's just a quick recap of OPEB that's going to point back to the 16 val, just because there is a budget number related to OPEB. So that's what that extra page sticking in there is.
All right, thank you.
All right, so page 3, as always, main driver of the changes in the pension contribution relate to asset performance. Unfortunately, there were a couple of bad years, but the good news is 16-17 was a good year, and you outpaced your 7% target rate and earned about 10.1%. You see there in the bottom of the market value column there. Now, because of those losses in the prior year, if you skip ahead to page 4, you see the smoothing, and the smoothing method, if you recall, was reset back with the 2014 valuation. So moving forward from there, again, unfortunately, you did have 2 loss years. So if you look at the column A, gain loss, that is the gain loss relative to the assumption. So 14-15, you're seeing, and both plans have roughly the same amount of assets, not identical, but similar. So they both had, $8 million plus losses in 14-15, close to $11 million losses 15-16, but then you see 16-17, that 10.1% return, more than expected, produced, about $5.4 million in the town plan, just shy of $5 million in the police and fire plan, for a total of over a $10 million gain. Now, the smoothing works both ways, so just like we smoothed the losses, we smoothed the gains. So all of that $10 million, you recognize 20% immediately. The balance of that gets recognized over the remaining 4 years to round out the 5-year smoothing. So because of that, and you had the 2 loss years, even though the return on the market value was 10.1, the return on the smooth value was 5%, so short of the assumed 7%. So that was about $7.6 million less than expected on an actuarial basis. Important, we always like to point out kind of where you stand as of the valuation date. On the valuation date, the combined unrecognized loss is 11.6. So what that means is going forward, the expectation is as those losses, if you earned 7% going forward from 7/1/2017 going forward, those losses would have to come out in the calculation, and so eventually the contribution is going to drift up by about $1.2 million as that $11.6 million in unrecognized losses are recognized. The actual asset losses were accompanied by some liability losses. The liabilities for the town were relatively small, about $275,000. For a plan of your size, that's considered pretty negligible. There were gains on, as we continue to be in a historically low period of inflation, there were gains from COLAs offset by losses relative to less than expected employee turnover. Similar to the town, there were small actuarial losses, liability losses in the police and fire, about $550,000. Also, based on the liability, pretty small. That is something that we monitor. If you recall, we do an experience study on the recommended every 5-year schedule. But in the meantime, we are comparing the assumptions. That's what these gains and losses represent. And if there were any material gains and losses, we would point that out and recommend the assumption changes as needed. Any questions on that? Page 5, we just like to give you a data summary. This is the data that went into the valuation that we received from the town, just to give you a summary. If you recall that page 6, we always show you 2 years, so you see the prior year, of note, of course, is the town plan is close to new entrants. So if you peek ahead to page 6, you see that the active count, police and fire is staying about the same, but for the town plan, it is dropping off considerably. This also shows you the, kind of what you're paying out in benefits as well.
You see it's dropping off under active. Is that where you're showing?
I'm sorry?
Under active?
Yeah, so on page 5, you see top right-hand corner, 565 active. If you flip ahead to the prior valuation, there was 613 actives in the town plan. So it dropped by about 48. And that's a combination of terminations and retirements.
New hires going to 401A.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Yes. Yeah. It's not showing a reduction in town staff.
Somebody retires, that number doesn't go, that number's never going to go up.
Correct, because the plan is closed, so there's no new entrants. So as people retire and/or terminate, that number will just keep going down.
And then, if I may, this
Mr.
is a snapshot on that date. So like the police and
Yes.
fire, the head count approved is higher, but if they're on that date.
Absolutely. It's a snapshot on a date,
It's the
so
higher
sometimes you
non-
get that if there's
Up and down
actually
ahead.
202 positions and they just weren't filled on that date, then.
And that's what you go
we're
by.
not- That's what we'll have.
Okay, thank you.
So turning ahead to page 7, total contributions increased from 9.09 to 9.7 million, primarily due to that asset loss that we talked about. It's really driven by the losses from 2014 to 16, and also to a much lesser extent, the liability losses that I referred to. If you recall, there's a 25-year amortization base that was fixed in 2016. It's expected to be paid off at the end of the period. So that after that period, the future contributions would expect it to be equal to the normal cost, because at that point you would be 100% funded. Already made this point that, again, when those $11.6 million in gains and losses are fully realized, the contribution will trend up by about 1.2 million. Since you know what's coming, we always do a 5-year projection. So there'll be slides later, and you'll actually see that happening. That the numbers at the end of the period are about a little bit more than $1 million bigger than today. Though there should be, if this current period of low inflation persists, there should continue to be salary scale and COLA gains in the near term. Though, if discussions with your investment advisors, it could also mean that your rate of return is going to be, you might have some losses relative to the 7% in the near term. Recall that is a long-term assumption. The town, we talked about the town being closed, so the normal cost component of the contribution, remember there's 2 pieces to the contribution: the normal cost, which is the prospective cost, the current cost of benefits, and then the amortization of the unfunded. That since the town side is closed, the town's normal cost will continue to shrink. Sorry, did you have a question? All right, so page 8, you're going to see a summary of that, see both the normal cost and the amortization of the unfunded, combined with some roll forward of both to get a bottom line contribution. For the police and fire, you know, as expected, you'd see the normal cost is trending up just a bit. Most of the increase is related to the amortization of the unfunded liability. Again, that's driven by the asset performance relative to the 7% rate of return. So the bottom line is that police and fire contribution of $4.66 million, up from $4.28 million. On the town side, you see, as we would expect, a drop in the normal cost from 2.45 to 2.39. Again, since that was a drop and the contribution did go up, it was completely driven by the increase in the amortization of the unfunded liability, again, primarily driven by the asset losses. So for the town side, you're seeing a contribution that was 4.81, increasing to 5.04. You add those two numbers together and you get the $9.7 million combined town and police and fire contribution.
So just a question, Mr. Mayor, is this what we would see in our budget books then? All right, so the number that we see on page 8 would be what we see on page 269 in the budget book. Is that correct? Okay. Any questions, Mr. Becker?
Just on the amortization, last year when you did the experience study, there was quite a lot of discussion and some, I believe, dissenting votes in regards to how the amortization was done at that time. How is that sort of now a year later and looking at where we settle now and seeing the contribution, you know, going up a little bit year over year, and just a lot of factors. Did that play into it? And sort of at this point, looking at that, how has that sort of worked out for us?
Well, the amortization is running down, and again, so it was 24 this year, it was 25 last year, because the plan is that, you know, you're going to pay it off over 25 years. So,
but that block was on a different amortization schedule, right, at the time, and then the new stuff is going in at a different.
Well, the way this valuation was completed, and that's certainly a discussion point, was that the new gain loss, which was not huge relative to the piece that was amortized at the time, the new gain loss is just relative to what we talked about, asset gains and losses and the liability, well, it was asset losses and the liability losses. So the new gain loss was amortized over the same remaining period as the last year balance, 24 years. But, you know, if there was an appetite to do something different, that's certainly a discussion point. But right now, you know, that does give you, as we talked about, there's the $11.6 million in unrecognized losses that are, you know, it's a pretty significant number. You know, running that that period down kind of smooths out the impact of that over time and creates kind of a smoother glide path of an increasing contribution. But another approach could be to use a shorter period for new gains and losses. And we could certainly, you know, explore that and give you numbers on that if that was something of interest.
I guess the question I would have, and I want to ask for something, but if it's exorbitantly complicated,
right,
fine. But I'd kind of like to know what, had we done at that time what we normally did and not stretch that out, sort of how this would look now. And if it'd be higher, possibly so be it, in that we're now also watching the funded level starting to go down, which, you know, it's great to save a little bit going in, but I know that one of the focuses we've had has also been to make sure we're putting enough in not to have that problem.
Right.
So,
yeah, I can tell you, if
I
mean, we could do it two ways. If I don't know that I can answer the question right now, and we could certainly get back to you.
You don't need to right now so much as follow-up.
Well, the specific question about what it would have been, and you used to use a 15-year, so if you had used 15 instead of 24, what would that look like? We can run that number. I don't have that. We did look at what would it be if you did new gain loss at 15 instead of 24, and that adds about $150,000 to the, so you'd be looking at 9.85 instead of 9.7.
Excuse me, all of Am I on? You have to look at multiple number of variables. You can say, what if your discount rate was stepped down like most people do, like a quarter, instead of a half at one time? So what the plan did was made a decision to go directly from a 7.0 to a, excuse me, 7.5 to
7.5 to
7.0. So, and we also made the decision at the same time to go from the 15-year to the, it was a rolling 15-year too, wasn't it?
Yes, it was
So
what's
a
referred to as an
rolling
open.
15-year, an open 15-year, which means every year is 15 more years. Instead of going to a rolling 15-year, we went to a solid 25-year, like home mortgage. Okay, so you could ask all kinds of questions, and some of those questions, the contribution requirement would be higher, and some of those questions, the contribution could be lower. So it's kind of like a fool's game in a way. It's just because the pension board made the decision they made based upon the input from the actuaries, the input from the on the investment side, on the asset side from the investment managers, and considering the experience study, et cetera. So you can say, well, if you did this, would it be more, if you did this, would it be less?
Yeah, we changed, last year something was changed.
I just said what it was changed as. It
Right.
went from 15-year sliding, 15-year rolling to a 25-year solid.
I know what it was changed, I remember the
Right.
conversation. I
Right.
made a point to go there
Right,
for
you were there
that
that night, I
because
remember that.
of the importance of it, and I know that I had some questions and some concerns surrounding it. I'm just sort of I'm trying to look at this year now, that we're a year into it, and we're looking at where we're at. I'm trying to understand, was that ultimately a good decision? Is it something that maybe, needs to be tweaked down the road? And we only have 1 year on it, but I'm trying to sort of set the stage. This is I think this is a valuable
Say
question.
good decision. I mean, are you questioning
Well,
the retirement?
one of the
The
concerns-
question would be, it would be,
Good or bad, how did it work out for us a little bit, now that we're a year into it?
it worked
Right.
out that we saved, the contribution requirement is lower. If we had gone from the 7.5 to 7 and stayed at the 15-year rolling, our contribution would be more than it is now. If we had gone from 7.5 to 7 3/8 to 7 1/4 to 7 1/8 to 7, which is what a lot of people do when they change the discount rate, they phase into it, then our contribution would be lower. So
I'm aware, we phased in, I believe, the last
Right,
time, and
that's
this
what I'm-
time we
right.
chose not to. We used that as a method to do it, but it also has some ramifications from a longer, than a 1 year,
Right,
do we
but
phase or
like-
not? Now this is here, and it's going to, and it's here
Right, by going-
year after year in a way that does reduce it. And I
No,
and I can recall.
that increased it. That's increased our
That's what I'm-
contribution requirement for 4 years.
Okay, so let's-
That's what I'm trying to understand, because we were looking at our funded level, and there's definitely concerns. And we had a lengthier discussion during the quarterly, I believe it was, when the CAFR came out about the funded levels. So just trying to sort of piece together the decisions that have been made, where we're at, and sort of how that builds into the funded level, and just what we're doing.
So here,
Just,
Yeah,
before we-
to answer
There.
directly, though, I mean, part of the problem with the lag is that there is no impact reflected here yet, because the 16 val was calculated a 17 contribution that was contributed after this valuation. So there is zero impact of
From
the
that.
changes last year reflected in this valuation yet.
So the answer,
it'll-
it might be, ask my question next year when we have more of that in there, which is fine. Again, getting back to,
Yeah.
I don't want to waste your time running a number for something that isn't even going to be in this set of data. If it's 1 year, I can see that data. Absolutely. Which is fine.
Just so you know, I work on a couple of surrounding towns and cities. I work on Stamford, and they just lowered their interest rate from 7.5 to 7 1/4, and they use a 15-year open period. I work on Danbury, and they've been at 7 1/4 for a while, and they use 20 years. All new gains or losses get amortized over 20 years, and then they kind of amortize the rest of the experience. So it's kind of a lot of different pools are going on. So we got a 20-year amortization now for Danbury. We got a piece at 19 years. We got a piece at 18 years. We got a piece at 17 years. We got a piece at 16 years. So that's what they're doing. But the fact that you're down at 7% means you're lower than the surrounding towns that I work on anyway.
Yeah, I think that
Which is a
speaks
very
to
good decision.
Bob's point about, it's hard to separate, what would the answer have been had you done a different combination?
I don't want to
of-
entirely
yeah.
second guess. I was there, I understand the discussion.
All right, let's move on.
Bob hit the
I wanna move
highlights for
on.
everybody.
Mr.
I get it. I just want to make sure that we're not setting ourselves up to have us go too low in the funding and as a percentage ultimately, and then find ourselves in a position where we're trying to throw in more money down the road.
Right.
You know,
I think
obviously,
the
on
board,
the
I
town
think
side, it might go
the
down.
I think the retirement board might take offense to your comments, because you're kind of implying that they are gaming the system to reduce the contribution rather than funding it based upon sound actuarial assumptions.
All right.
I take offense to
Okay.
that. I don't-
Hold on,
I
hold
don't
on,
think
hold
that's
on.
what I'm try-
Everybody.
I don't think that's what I'm trying to do.
Sounds like.
No, hold on a second, all right? Because we could spend 2 hours on this one topic. Mr. Becker, you have a question? I don't think he was trying, it's just a question. It's just a question on a what-if that might be too early to answer at this point. Right, Mr. Becker?
Exactly.
Okay. So, and it might even be too early to have a follow-up because it's 1 year, so it's an appropriate question for February of 19, right?
Yeah, based on what you said, I'll come back looking for that data then.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I would say if maybe even requested earlier so that
Yeah.
it can be
No, no.
considered before we're this far down the road. So if there is an appetite for revisiting amortization policy, that the relevant bodies can see those numbers and make decisions.
Yeah, I can send a note through the chairman earlier, put on my calendar to do that.
Excellent.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dave.
All right.
We're still on page 8, we're moving
Yes,
on.
Yes, we're moving on to page 9, which, this just, graphically shows you, the police and fire plans, ratios, the accrued liability, and both the actuarial and the market, assets. Page 10, shows you basically the smoothing method in operation. We basically, obviously, it's draft results through 17. If everything's approved here today, those would be final. And then, 18 and later are projections based on what I was alluding to earlier, that, with the smoothing method running out, and you see that over time, the market and the actuarial values converge. That's assuming, again, that going forward from 7/1/17, you earn exactly 7%. So then page 11 shows what that looks like as a funded ratio, and I think as was maybe mentioned earlier, you are seeing, and this is mainly because of the smoothing, because that's working out, you're seeing in the near term the funded ratio drop, but then it starts picking back up once those gains and losses have been fully recognized.
Definitely on a market value of asset basis, you'll see your funding ratio improve each year.
And that is, just a,
Just because, sorry, the reduction is because you project out 5 years from this move.
Right.
Because of the 2 years of loss before, greater than the gain this year, right?
right,
That's
so,
what it is.
yeah, the difference is that $11 million you haven't recognized
Right,
yet.
right, right,
Yeah.
right.
And just to put your funded ratio in perspective, you're still in the top 15% of plans across the
It's
state.
pretty darn flat, actually, right?
What's that?
Pretty darn flat, year over year.
The funded ratio? Yeah, you've got some interaction there, but it's starting to, using that same mortgage analogy, with a 25-year amortization, in the near term, you're paying some principal, but the amount of principal you're paying off is going to grow over time, and so you're going to start making better and better progress over time.
And you said we were in the top 15%. That was kind of,
That is correct.
We need top 50% of the state, or?
State of Connecticut, municipal sponsored, locally sponsored pension plans.
Okay, thank you.
72% average?
Yeah, well,
72 and 7%, I think.
yeah. So you're well above average as far as a funded ratio. And that 7% is now where the average is trending. You're now kind of in the middle of the pack as far as what you're using for the assumed rate of return.
Did we have a goal for our funding ratio?
It's always a fully funded,
Goal's 100%, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, right.
which we do, which is why we're in the top 15%.
That's why we've been funding this, 100% of the what used to be the ARC, and now it's the ADEC,
Yeah,
to get there. Had a couple of bad years in the market, and last year was a good year.
right.
So slides 12, 13, and 14 just give you the same information on the town side plan. Certainly if you have any questions, but if not, I will move forward to the projections. We always do a five years out from the val date, so in the gray there, you're seeing the, the current numbers we just presented, the 9.07. And then, what you're seeing is basically the impact of that 11.6 working its way through. So you see that the number is, a little bit more than, that 1.2. So you add the 1.2 million that I was referring to the 10.7. So you'd expect the contribution 5 years out to be at least 10.9. It's a little bit more because you have this combination impact of the police normal cost is continuing to grow, but the town normal cost is continuing to shrink. Eventually, it's going to get to the point where the shrinkage of the town will dwarf the increase of but you're not there yet. So the normal costs are.
So question then, if we have another good year, another 10% year, if this would affect the projections going forward?
Absolutely.
Right.
Yep. Yeah, and if you that's a good segue to slide 16. If you peek ahead there, that's the main driver of the difference between the two, because again, the liability gains and losses were pretty uneventful, though it did push a little bit in the other direction. But if you look at where we thought the contribution was going to be 10.07, and remember we factor in this, when we did the projections last year, we factored in the smoothing, so we knew about the losses. So we thought it was going to be 10.07 and you're 9.7 instead, so that 370,000 is really the benefit of the 20% of the $10 million gain that you earned relative to the market rate, the 7%. Page 17 just gives you, we've covered some of this already, but of course the projections assume all assumptions will be exactly realized. We talked about, we assume police and fire normal costs are going to grow by the salary scale of about 375, the ultimate salary scale. Talked about that. Yeah, and then we always make the point, it was talked about earlier, the town, you have increasing numbers of people going into the 401(a)(d)(c) plan, and so if you wanted a total picture of retirement costs, you'd have to add that number in here to kind of see how that's changing in total. Page 18 gives you the sensitivity analysis. Top line, of course, is the 7%. That's exactly the same as the prior slide. And then we just show you, what does it look like if you were to make another, not that there's any need for this, because again, last year worked with your investment advisors and remain comfortable with your 7% assumption based on your asset allocation. But, if those things change, what would it look like if, you were looking at a 6.5 or a 6? And you see the impact of that, adds not quite $3 million to the contribution, just shy of $3 million to drop 50 basis points.
Are most plans at 7% at this point?
Yeah, at 7% is definitely the average across the state right now. And it seems like the lowerings have kind of slowed down. So, whether the average stays right there or trends maybe a little bit south. Probably we do two averages when we look at it. We take the average across the state, just flat out total plans, what's their rate, take the average, that's about 7. The liability weighted, because the larger plans tend to have the higher rates, is probably closer to 7.25. But then they would typically have probably, they tend to lean towards higher equity allocation, so it makes a certain amount of sense. And they also have the ability to invest in more diverse asset classes.
Okay. Any questions? All right, moving. I'll show you. Yeah. Go ahead, thank you.
Okay, all right, so if there's no questions on pension, now we'll move on to the one-page insert related to OPEB. Again, remind everybody that, that we didn't do it, there's no new valuation. When we published the 2016 valuation, it gave the town the contributions for both the 17-18 and the 18-19 fiscal years. And you're looking at a snippet of that below. So the bottom line is the budget number for OPEB in total between police and fire and town is $9.783 million. And again, that's right out of the 16 valuation. Just totally coincidentally, you happen to also be your 20. Though, for a pension plan, 21% is not something to brag about. For OPEB, that's pretty good. Puts you in about again, also in the top 15%. Totally coincidental that the two are the same. Unfortunately, there's still about 60% of the state that's not yet funded anything for OPEB. And finally, we did one, because you did implement new GASB standards. You actually had another year, but you early adopted for your funded plans. So you adopted both GASB 74 and 75, effective for the fiscal year ending 17. So if you turn over, that's what you're seeing is the impact of that. The new standards, very similar to the pension standards. At the end of the day, they require you to use, for accounting purposes, your market assets, compare that to your liabilities, and whatever that unfunded liability is, that goes on your books. So because of that, there had to be an opening balance adjustment. The old number that was a footnote on your books was something called the net OPEB obligation, and you had about $15.5 million on your books as of 7/1/2016. The net unfunded OPEB number as of 7/1/2016 was 103, so there was a balance sheet adjustment of $87.9 million as of 7/1/16 to reflect the new accounting changes. Now, another benefit of the new accounting standard is now when your accounting numbers come out at year end, you'll get a new market value funded ratio, and that's what you're looking at below. So even though the last valuation was as of 2016, the fiscal year ending 17 financials, which included this early adoption, actually showed a funded ratio as of June 30, 2017, which reflected the asset gains during that year. Even though there wasn't a new valuation, we used rolled forward liabilities and actual market value assets as of 2017, and it showed a pretty good improvement because of the asset gains during the year and the funded ratio. You see the bolded numbers there. Between the police and fire, you were about 21.3, and that increased to 25.6% funded as of June 30, 2016. Any questions about OPEB?
Sure.
Mr. Walsh?
Are we falling behind because we're in the top 15%? At a certain time, we were early adopters to this. We were in the top 10%. And now, also now, we're seem to be in the top 15% in the state.
Yeah, I'd have to do more analysis to see, is that because, others, there were things that produced other people that jumped ahead of you, or, so it's hard to know, why did you, if you were number, 25, why are you 30 now? Why was it, other plans improving, and, it's hard, so there's not an easy answer to your question, unfortunately.
Okay. Is it hard to figure that out?
I mean, you can, I mean, there's lots of components. There's, you know, what's your contribution policy, are you paying it? Yes, and, you know, you've got a, you know, conservative funding policy, and you always pay your contribution, so you're good there. Your assumptions aren't, you know, are now middle of the road, so there's nothing there really. So it really comes down to what was your asset performance relative to others. The markets have been pretty volatile, so, and this is, I don't have any empirical data on this, but I think I do have enough experience with other plans, and I know some of the plans that were below you that are now above you just had really good investment performance. So, you know, they might have, instead of, you had 10.1, they might have had 14% a year, you know, in the good years. So we are seeing a little more variability in asset performance, but, you know, anytime you look at that, you have to say, well, what kind of risks did they take to get that return? So those are the kinds of things that make a straightforward, you know, a simple answer to your question kind of hard to.
Is the discount rate you're using for this fund 7%?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. So say we were just to magically hit 7% every year. How long would it take to fund this? 100%?
Well, you're currently using a 25-year scale, well, 24 more years.
24 more years.
Yeah, because you're one payment into a 25-year amortization.
Okay. But we've changed some of the, for new hires and things like that, some of the benefits for some of the employees, right? In some of the union plans, correct?
Well, we were discussing earlier that you know, the town plan's closed, so there's no new entrants coming into it.
Okay. But, okay, and this is just on health, the OPEB?
We're just talking, I'm sorry, I was back on pension, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So this is really just the health plan, right? The OPEB?
yeah,
Okay, paying for health benefits?
yeah, in post-retirement, yes.
Okay. And if we change those plans over time where we give less coverage or something else, that would drop, we'd have a more funded basis, correct? Because we'd have less expenses going out?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's where, and I apologize, my brain went back to pension, but if you're talking about your funded ratio for OPEB and like why you aren't still tops, there's even more dynamics there. It's not just the investment return, but it's exactly what you're talking about.
The plan
retirement plan design. So if there were people that went to HSA ahead of you, or now there's people moving to the state plan, people are making changes to the underlying health plan that materially, rather than affecting the asset side, is materially impacting the liability side, and that's improving funded ratios.
Okay.
So yeah, we have some plans that are, you know, now 80% funded, which is incredible for an OPEB plan, and a lot of that was not so much asset performance as change in the underlying health plan.
Okay. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Walsh. Mr. DeWitt?
Yeah, I think for Mr. Mayor, on the OPEB, I see the top two lines on page 270 of our budget book are the two OPEB contributions, but they don't match the numbers here. Fire and police 49615, fine, but the town seems to be about 350 shorter, less in the budget book than it is on the document here.
That's because 340 of that goes to the Water Pollution Control Fund.
Oh, there you
And
go.
that reconciliation is done on page 302.
So, and we'll take a look at that in a minute.
Yeah. The combined number is
So
there, but it's between two budgets.
So and the town side 5.04 number, that's this budget, WPCA and BOE? Is that the three numbers
Yes,
that makes that up?
correct, that's the
Okay.
reconciliation.
I'm good.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
And that's on the previous page 300 is sorry.
Got it.
All right, thank you, Mr. DeWitt. Any other
Just ask them one
questions?
question. This is just for personal information. I'm surprised to see 60% of the community is not having any fund whatsoever. Is there a penalty for not having set up an OPEB fund?
Not that I'm aware of.
So the communities that are doing this are just doing it to just kind of fund it. So
Just to, I mean, you're leveling out, you know, the funding path. It's pay now or pay later. So do you want to have, what is the glide path of the checks you're writing? If you're doing pay-as-you-go,
Yeah.
it's a very steep glide path. If you're pre-funding, then you're leveling it off. So it's,
Okay, thank you.
Well, there's more to it than that. Also, by funding it currently, you're putting the money away today, and you're paying, the town is paying what people are earning today. Whereas if you do it the other way as a pay-as-you-go, people 20 years from now are paying what people earned 20 years ago.
Right, and do the credit ratings
So
look
it's
at
it's like
OPEB?
matching expenses with the services.
Do the credit ratings look at OPEB as well?
Yeah, the credit ratings look at, they're very holistic in their approach to looking at liabilities. They look at your debt service, they look at OPEB, they look at your unfunded, your balanced fund percentage, they look at the pension percentage, they look at all globally.
Okay.
And they won't tell you what their requirements are, it's just a hodgepodge, throw it in a pot and give you a credit rating.
Well, no, I mean, you've read our reports, and they always say that we're doing great jobs.
There is a bit of a penalty for plans that don't fund. They have to show their liabilities at a lower interest rate. This year, that 20-year municipal bond index rate was 3.58%. So if you did that if you had to show your liabilities at 3.58%, you'd have a lot more liability out there.
Yeah, well, I think
That
I was
goes
on
in the
the,
CAFR.
the Board of Selectmen when that came up, and that was one of the reasons we formed the fund, was to get the lower discount rate.
Right, and that actually it reminded me to cover this last bullet point. You do have the separate Board of Ed only plan
Yes.
that one we do use the 3.5% discount rate because it's unfunded. But it's very small liability.
Okay.
Right, and it's also, we never have to pay anything for it. So it's an unfunded liability that's not a liability
Yeah.
because of the explicit rate subsidy.
There you go. That's a neat trick.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Comments? Thank you very much,
All right.
and good luck.
Thank you. Did
And
you
welcome.
want to get a brief?
Sure. Brief background?
Sure. I've been with Hooker and Holcomb for a little over 10 years. I wish I could say that was my first job out of college, but I've been doing this for about 35 years. The last 20 years, I've been pretty much devoted to municipalities in Connecticut. So I've worked on a lot of different towns and cities. I tell people I've worked on towns and cities that are bigger than Fairfield and towns and cities that are smaller than Fairfield. So I've got both.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, if we can go to page 269, 270, where you will see these numbers in our budget book plus life insurance. So before we get to life insurance, are there any other questions on OPEB or the retirement contributions?
You want to open it to the public?
Sorry?
Open it to the public? Open to the public?
Are there any questions from the public? While we're still on this.
Yeah, you got to ask. It's one of the rules.
I'm waiting.
No.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Okay, so we're on page 270, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to go through 4 items. As you can see from the agenda, I'm going to go through the retirement contributions for the 401A, long-term disability for the 401A plans, and then the life insurance for retirees and the life insurance for the actives. You look on page 270, you see the last number, actually, wait a second, the second to last number, 52312. See, it has a budget amount there of $200,000. That represents the 4% contribution that's required to the people that are not in the pension plan but are in the 401A defined contribution plan as opposed to defined benefits plan. That number was calculated based upon a couple months ago the vacancies that we had at the time, assuming 2 things. One, you have the 2% increase in salaries, so the 4% goes up 2%, and then you have new people. You have people who are rolling off when they retire and or leave the company or the town for another reason. So you have new people rolling on. So it's a mixture of combination of those 2 things. This number was calculated just based upon the known people that were the known positions that were vacant at that time plus the 2%. So the number is probably not adequate. But it's also based upon as though everybody was hired the same, as the first of the year. So I'm going to actually be looking at that number in a little bit more detail and discussing that with HR to see if how at the end of every year, budget session, we go back through everything and we send out a sheet where we see the recommended changes based upon latest and greatest information. So I might be looking at that. I might want to increase that by 25,000 or something like that. So that's how that number is calculated, and that was the one shortfall in the calculation. We didn't make any assumption for people who have not left yet to be leaving, so the churn factor.
Okay. Mr. Walsh?
So that's kind of a mathematical kind of fudge number guess, some degree.
Yeah, we try to take the knowns and then throw some factors in. I don't think we threw in enough.
All right, and that number is going to
factors.
continue to go up over time as we get
As salaries
older
go
people
up.
retire and new employees come in and they're on the 401A.
Correct, and all new employees come in on.
So we'll be seeing that go up at a steady rate for the future.
Right, that's town side. Police and fire, as
Yep.
are still in the defined benefit plan.
Yep.
52,310 will be going down as people,
Not 10.
52,310 retiree contributions will go.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're looking at
Yeah,
that,
police
yes,
and fire
okay.
will change with the
Well, it doesn't seem to be going down.
retirement contributions will go down, will they not?
Eventually.
Based on the fact that they should have gone down this year because we went from
Well-
613 to 545 in the.
Well, it all
Governor Holcomb.
depends on investment returns and all sorts
Well,
of
you-
assumptions.
Your two losses, those, we're still.
We're still,
Okay, yeah,
we're
this
still,
is with the
we're still
smoothing.
paying
No,
for the
I get it,
unfunded
right.
fund balance, and we got, Yeah.
It's in the smoothing thing, I
Yeah.
got it right.
And you're also
Ultimately,
having
that
the-
number should start going down based
Yeah,
on the
yeah,
fact.
yeah, in
there's
20 years
less
it'll be-
people involved in that pension.
right. In 24 years, it'll be zero.
And the retirement board lowering the,
You're right here to celebrate that. How's that?
and the retirement board lowering the discount rate also had an effect on that, which
Correct.
will actually be a bigger effect in 2 years, depending on what happens when market returns. Well,
Right.
because there was a smoothing effect you guys did with that amortization, right?
Right, but which also means that the $6 million net income, or next positive above the 7% return, the 10.1% return, the difference there between 7.0 and the 10.1 was like $6 million or something
Yep.
like that. So that's smooth. So we only took in maybe it's $8 million actually. We only took in 20% of that also.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions on page 270?
All right,
Asking to speak.
well, there's more to cover.
Okay.
There's other items on 270. Are there any other questions on the 401A contribution? Because now I'm going to talk about disability.
Ms. Zezima?
Hi, Bob. Can you speak to the long-term disability, the change in that
Yeah,
number?
I
yes,
don't think
I
Bob's
am.
done with his presentation yet.
Okay. The next item I'm going to speak about is actually long-term disability. And there's a document going around. I'll wait till it gets completed. As you remember from the Board of Ed presentation, the disability and the life is out to bid. The bid results came in last week, and we've massaged them and reviewed them. And what you have there is a summary of our choice, and B, an alternative that we faced. And I want to make sure you guys understand what we did and why we did it, or what we think we're going to do. We haven't actually told the carrier yet that we've accepted their bid. So what you have there is the first column, Sun Life and Anthem current costs, 17-18. You see the Board of Ed is $263,000, the town is $146,000, for a total for the town-wide is $409,000. Then you see option 1 there is the Sun Life Anthem renewal. And then the number 2 bracket is Liberty Mutual, and then 3 is the difference between the two. One of the things that we have learned through this process is that even though we pay more or less have been paying the proper premium from a perspective, The premium has not been balanced properly. In other words, between the life and the disability. This is a combination of life and disability. So when we go out to bid, a new carrier is going to look at the experience separately. They're going to look at the disability experience, and they're going to look at the life experience, and they're going to give you, and they're going to look at the Board of Ed, and they're going to look at the town. They're going to look at all as separate entities, and then put it together in one rate. So whereas when you have a current carrier, what a current carrier will do is basically just give you a % increase. So if your risk factor isn't aligned in the premium, it's going to be off balance, but the total is going to be the same. So that's why you see, if you go to the Board of Ed, the renewal from Anthem is $294,000. The Liberty Mutual is $292,000. For the town side is $168,000. The Liberty Mutual is $251,000. Total of $443,000 year one Liberty Mutual, $463,000 year one for Anthem. You see that, so by choosing option 2, the cost of the town in year one is $80,000. Okay? But Liberty Mutual has given us, in their proposal, a 3-year rate guarantee. So just quickly, if you go down to the bottom of the Liberty Mutual line, you see that the 3-year total is $1,631,000. If you go to the Anthem bottom line, it's $1,869,000. Okay, and that's with some caveats, as you see with the asterisk there, is that the Anthem LTD is a 1-year rate guarantee only, and they have indicated, you pretty much told us what the rates will be for year 2, and then for year 3, we don't have anything from Anthem or Sun, so we just assume they would be potentially the same as year 2. So, what the town could do is choose Sun Life Anthem renewal year 1. We would save $80,000 if we did that. Okay? As you can see in the far right column. However, that means we go out to bid next year. And going out to bid next year, I think at best, we would get what you see in the results there under the Sun Life and Anthem renewal, and it could deteriorate. Whereas on the Liberty Mutual side, we have a guarantee. So you can see year 2 with Liberty Mutual, we have a $158,000 positive, and in year 3, $158,000 positive. And so if we're going with the Liberty Mutual proposal, we have a $237,000 positive over the 3-year period. Now, because of the experience difference, where the bad experience is pretty much on the town retiree life side, because that's really a death benefit, because you got it. You know, you can pay it now, right, and let them die whenever. But maybe I shouldn't have said that. But it's a death benefit, not really like a life insurance policy. So that's where the bad experience is, and that's why in the Liberty Mutual, where the rates are adjusted by experience exposure, so you see that there's going to be a realignment. So the Board of Ed is over the 3-year period compared to Sun Life, which as I indicated earlier, it just goes up on a, maintaining that imbalance between the exposure. There's a benefit to the Board of Ed of $484,000, cost of the town of $247,000. But from a business perspective, as you can see over the 3-year period, it's a positive to the town of $237 dollars, plus takes away the risk of going out to bid and having further deterioration going forward. So I just want to make sure, I know this is a little bit more than what I normally show, but since this came up the other day when the Board of Ed, I want to go into detail.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we have a guarantee, basically,
Yeah.
at least for 3 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Any questions from the board? Mr. DeWitt?
Just a curiosity more than anything, Mr. Mayor. So you said, so Sun Life and Anthem's our current provider, right?
Correct.
And you said what they normally do, rather than doing the experience, is just give you a percentage increase year over year.
Right, rather than readjust and realign the experience, right.
But
Because
on
it's
the
with their,
downside-
they have their historical experience. So the dollars are the same, more or less,
Right.
but the allocation is different.
So, I mean, I'm not seeing an increase year over year for the town for the next 3 years in the renewal. So they're holding that. So I guess I'm confused. If you said they were going to just do a percentage year over year.
Well, no, you see, it's 294, and then it goes for the Board of Ed, it goes to 533, and then and for the,
Right, but the town holds constant. Are you saying they're only going to plus up a percentage on the Board of Ed side? Which is the larger side, I mean.
Town stays at 168.
Right.
well, that's what I said was they, that's what I'm saying, that's where the rate increase in year 2 is the Anthem long-term liability for the Board of Ed is increased 3 times in year 2. That's the way they quoted it.
So the Board of Ed goes from
And
294.
if you want, we have Joel Chamberlain in the audience, who is here from Aon.
My
He can
only
go into it
confusion
more
was you
detail.
said that a current carry would just plush up a percentage each year, and they're
Well, they
actually-
kind
they're only plussing up the Board of Ed side. They're holding the town side constant, which, again, it's more of a curiosity than anything. I'm
So,
assuming we're going
Can
with
you,
Liberty.
before you start, just state your name and
yes.
address where you're from for the record?
Yeah, Joel Chamberlain from Aon Consulting. The Sun Life coverage provides the life insurance for both the Board of Ed and the town side. The Anthem provides the coverage for the long-term disability for the Board of Ed. And the Anthem policy is still in a rate guarantee from a prior renewal for 1 more year. Okay? And when we went out to market, we decided to lump that into our marketing to see if there was an advantage to consolidating carriers and getting the best rates. But the current Anthem LTD rate is the lowest out there because it's still in that rate guarantee period. And the experience suggests that the rate should be much higher. And that's why Anthem's second-year proposal is so much higher.
Got it. But have we made a decision?
I'm going with Liberty Mutual.
Okay.
Right,
That would seem, this data would seem to lead you that way, right?
Yeah.
At least for 3 years. I mean,
right.
it makes sense.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
it's guaranteed,
And
it's good service,
So-
yeah,
Any
right.
oth-
I get it.
Now, what does not, now, with the numbers that have come in, there's differences between the proposal and the budget, which I want to, so the budget for long-term disability, the budget is 38,000. That's, the revised is 35,000. I'm using round numbers here, it's 34,800 or something. So there's a favorable savings on that line item of 3,000. This is on the town side. The life insurance retirees is in the budget at 68,000. That's going to be 172,000 for negative variance of 104. And the life insurance actives is in there at 82,000, which the proposal is 44,000. So that's a positive of $38,000. So you'll see these suggested changes to the budget on that sheet we send out where you have our latest and
Stuff that
greatest
happened while
information.
during the budget process,
Right.
right?
Right.
So what's the net of those? three numbers?
63, negative 63,
To the.
right.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any other questions, comments on this worksheet or on page 270?
Sure. Bob, is this disability in lieu of Social Security disability?
No, the disability in the pension plan, excuse me, let me rephrase that. The pension plan includes disability coverage. So the people in the 401A don't have disability. So this is the disability coverage for people in the defined contribution plan.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, Mr. Mayor.
All right, I'm going to give a short introduction for the life insurance, excuse me, the health insurance, then I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Chamberlain and Mr. Lindgren.
So we go to page 85.
Going to page 85. So what we do here every year, just to kind of recap, we get the numbers through, what's the first pass? Through December. That's what goes in the budget. As of today, we have the numbers through January, and the January numbers will be stale tomorrow because as of tomorrow, Mr. Carlton will be furnishing us the experience through January, and that
February.
you know, or through February. Thank you, through February, and that that's not because we were trying to hide anything from you guys, but it's the information flow from the carrier to the experience and the time to put it, massage it on and put it together. The January numbers were better than the December numbers, and I anticipate the February numbers normally are, partially because it's a short month, but it's also against the short month. So I think the January numbers came in about, I think, 126,000 better than the December numbers. So with that intro, I'll turn it over to Aon and Mr. Chamberlain and Mr. Lindgren.
All right, first, are there any handouts or anything, or you're just,
Those were, we do have copies of what we sent you, but we
That's
did.
this?
Yes,
okay. Did everybody?
I need a handout, I'm sorry.
yeah.
I need one too.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
I have one. No, also included in their presentation today, we've asked them to go through and show the differences between our current experience and what the experience would be in the state 2.0 plan. And so they're going to go through a little bit on that also.
Okay.
Carlton Lindgren, Aon Consulting. The document you have should have 3 pages. The top page is the projection of the 18-19 fiscal year. I'm not sure how you want me to go through this. I mean, we've been through this for a number of years now. Do you want me to actually go through the calculations, or do you want to just talk about the totals?
Let's start with the totals, and if people have questions, we can work our way back.
Okay. So from left to right on the document is on the left-hand side is how we work our way down to get to the total cost for each line of coverage. So in those next 4 columns, you'll see the active, retiree, under, retiree, over 65, and the total for the Anthem Medical and the prescription drug under the EGWIP policy. And then the next 4 are the prescription drugs for the active and under age 65 retirees. And then the next 3 are for dental. And then the last 3 columns are the totals. So I'll just run through the active medical calculation. First column on the left. I'll do it quickly. You can ask questions along the way. So we take the experience period claims, and those are claims through January of 2018 to project for the 18-19 fiscal year. So in this case, $8,657,000. We have to subtract from that claims that are in excess of the individual stop-loss limit because they're not the liability of the town of Fairfield. They get paid by the stop-loss vendor, okay, because they report gross claims to us, so we have to take those claims out. So the $8,600,000 minus the $943,000 gives you $7,714,000. We have to trend those experience claims forward to the fiscal period that we're trying to solve for, which is the 18-19 year. So that's at an annual trend rate of 6%. We have to trend it over 17 months. So it's an effective rate of 8.6%. So that $7,714,000 now becomes $8,377,000. We divide that by the heads that produced those claims, in this instance 452, to to get a per capita number of 18,539. And then we project that forward by the latest month of head counts, because that's the best guess we have as to what the head counts are going to be during the 18-19 year. That brings that number, actually in this case, down to 8,138,000. There were no benefit adjustments. If something happened to the plan, we made some significant plan changes, or you added a group that was, you know, significantly older than the population that you have today, we'd have to make some kind of a benefit adjustment. You add to the claims, so the adjusted claims now are 8,138,000. You add to that the administrative expenses that Anthem's charging to adjudicate the claims and overhead and so forth. The network access fee, that's another Anthem charge to maintain their networks. And then the stop-loss fee of $914,000 gives you a total of $9,345,000. You add all those numbers up across the board, you come up with a total of $19,755,628. And then the line right under that is last year's rates times the current head counts. So this is what the premium would be projected for 18-19 if there was no adjustment necessary. Okay, so that's what you're paying today, basically. So there's an increase of $520,000 in requirement, which equals 2.7%. By all accounts, a very good renewal. You know, positive claim experience in the past, 12 to 14 months.
So it's a 2.7% increase.
Increase, right. And you can see on the annual trend line of 6%, in average groups, claims would increase by 6% a year. So we would, if we just looked at nothing else, we would expect to see this number at 2.7 be 6. So that's a function
But
of...
again, the reason it's not is...
your claim experience. So when we set the rates in the prior year, we expect a certain level of claims. If your claims come in under that level, then the increase next year doesn't have to be as big because your claims are lower than what's expected.
Okay. Mr. DeWitt, you had a question?
I always have a tough time getting from this number to a budget number in the book. Now, the 19,755,000, right? That's everything.
Well,
Retirees, all
that's-
active, the whole nut, right?
That's the whole shooting match. It is a gross number, though. Keep that in mind, though. This doesn't take out any employee contributions.
Got it. So when we see a number for health self-insurance in 1320, that's $10.4 million. That's that 19 number minus the contributions?
Well, the 19 is, no, the 19 is the gross number. That's broken down into lots of different slices and dices, right? You have the retirees under 65, the retirees over 65,
Yep.
the actives, the WPCA, and you have the employee cost share, et cetera, and then so if you add all those up together, now you're getting them, and they'll come back to this number.
Yeah, I keep forgetting about WPCA too. Okay.
Thank you,
Got
Mr.
it.
DeWitt.
Yeah,
Ms.
thanks.
You have a question?
Sure.
Mr. Walsh?
The retirees, do they get the benefits and the plans that were in effect at the time they retired, or do they get what the town is getting when the town changes the plan for its active employees? Do they get that plan?
This is actually,
Yeah.
this is something that I'm dealing with constantly. Several years ago, the prior first selectman gave the retirees a plan that was actually better than the plan when they were working.
Better than what?
The plan that they had when they were working.
Are you asking about under age 65 retirees or over age 65?
He's
Well, why
retiring.
don't you tell me the difference
He's
between
asking
them?
about both.
Yes.
He's asking about both.
The overs go on the
So-
supplement, Medicare
So-
supplemental plan?
So he gave, so they, basically what happened when they had several plans, they wanted to combine all the plans, so to the retirees at that time, they made a deal with them, they gave them a plan which it's a $100 deductible plan. So, and that's all they pay. There's no co-pays once you're over 65.
He gave them that plan?
Right.
Wasn't that applying to him, too? Wasn't he retiring? Wasn't Mr. Flato retiring?
Yeah. Well, it was long before he retired, but he retired eventually, yes.
Okay, but he knew he was retiring. At some
I
point.
think at that point he was hoping he was retiring.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess he was here 10 years, right? I don't.
Kind of a bit self-serving.
Yeah. So anyway, so we have, so several of the over 65 people are on that plan, which is a $100 deductible plan. And for a period of time, that was the practice of the town, was to put people when they turned 65 onto that plan. We have discontinued that practice, and so now, and we've changed, and we've adjusted and detailed it in the CBAs. Now, most people, when they retire at, if they're under 65 or over 65, they retire on the plan that they are actively on when they were working. And the people that are currently retired under age 65, when they turn 65, or in the past, they got transitioned into the higher benefit plan, i.e. the $100 deductible plan, they now stay in the plan that they are in when they're under 65, which is the same plan that they were in when they were working. There's one union, I believe, where actually the retiree plan, I don't recall which one, Mr. Hibson is in the audience and he might know the answer to that question. There's one plan where actually the, one union where the retiree benefits may change from time to time as change for the actives.
Can I ask a question about that too? And that.
Go ahead, Mr. McDowell.
So when they retire, they're then essentially locked in to whatever plan that they were under when they were working. Is that?
Currently, yes.
Okay. Is there any, maybe it's a CBA issue, if you can't answer the question, you can't answer the question. Do any retired employees follow active employees, whatever benefits they get through collective bargaining? In other words, the co-pays can increase?
As I said, there's one union where the CBA says the act is, the retirement benefit will be as it changes from time to
It
time.
changes, okay, thanks.
Ms. Desimone?
So if you continue working after you turn 65, essentially our medical insurance, once they transition to Medicare, is just for supplemental?
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Walsh, anything?
The only other question I have is in regards to the experience period lives, where it starts off at 452 with the 1 month lag.
Yep.
And then the projected current year average lives, why does it go down? Are we presuming that people leave the town, or the number
No, we're
of
not.
employees go down?
You know, that's not a presumption. That's the actual head counts as of January of 2018. So
Okay.
somewhere in that 12-month period, the head counts decreased.
So it's from the previous January? They
Well,
decreased?
the 452
Yep.
is an average of the 12 months that we're using in the experience period.
All right.
The 439 is just the single month of January.
Just a single month?
Right, because that's the best guess that we have as to what would be in effect from from July of 18 to July of 19.
Okay.
You know, unless somebody...
Where did the 13 people go? Did they get fired?
Vacancies, I mean,
do we have that many less people working for the town?
Well, there's more people on the retiree under 65 if you look at the column just to the right of that. So there's only 4 difference in total. It goes from 881 to 877.
Okay.
Okay, so it looks to me like some people retired and are now classified as under 65 retirees, and they haven't been replaced in the active population.
Is that what's going on?
That's one of the
So there's 13
Vacant
people that,
positions and-
13 vacant positions, you think?
people that moved on that particular date and time,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Just a question on the retirees. Does the plan covers the spouse, too?
Yes,
Same exact plan? Okay.
And they're part of the 452 and 439s?
no, No, they're the 439 is employees that are covered, then they have, some of them have
Retirees,
family coverage, and some of them have two-party coverage, and some of them
Okay.
have single
Yeah, there's
coverage.
316 over 65s, and there's 122 under 65 retirees.
And that includes the spouse, I'm assuming?
Or is that a family plan for those individuals?
No, some of those would be
These are
individual only.
heads, these are heads of household, yeah,
Yes,
not
okay.
belly, not belly buttons.
individuals, okay.
Right.
Okay, good. All right.
Okay,
Any other questions on this page? All right, we'll flip the page.
okay, so the second page is, oh, there's a lot of numbers here, so I'll try to go through it. As Mr. Mayor said, this is the estimated self-insured cost for the town and the board compared to the fully insured cost that you'd pay would have paid under the State 2.0 plan, the state partnership plan. Okay, so the top section in blue outlines the projected cost for 2017-18, so the year that we're currently in. 877 lives projects a cost under the self-insured plan of $17,264,000. Under the state plan, if we took those same head counts, by tier, individual, two-party, family, and so forth, and multiplied it by the state rates, you get $15,972,000. So that's a difference of $1,292,000, or 7.5%.
Okay, but that's not...
Question.
All right, go ahead, Mr. Walsh.
Wouldn't you have to do that whole analysis? I mean, we don't know what the experience of those people would be.
It doesn't matter.
What do you mean?
The state rates the plan.
I'm not talking about the state side.
Yep.
I'm talking about the self-insured cost, the Anthem ESI, right?
Yeah, there's,
I mean, you'd have to do this whole sheet, right?
and I did.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, it's not included in this package. I mean, I certainly can show it to you, but.
Okay.
So
you took
yeah,
everyone's
when we-
experience.
Yeah, when we do the renewal projection, we also update the current year. So we do a projection that updates the current year. So that's where we're getting that number from. Okay?
Okay, so when you do the renewal, you're also doing a renewal for the Board of Ed, just to compare the programs?
Well,
Because I thought we
yeah.
were letting them go off to the state partnership so that we don't have to worry about our whole
yeah, there's three
internal
pieces.
internal service fund, so we're just out of that, because
Right.
we're out of that business.
Right. There's three pieces to the public school calculations down here. One of them was, we were asked to produce numbers. The question was, what if we stayed with Cigna today compared to the state partnership plan? Now, in my mind, it's not a real meaningful calculation or comparison, because what we had to do that calculation was take claims that were 2 years old, that were incurred as Cigna claims, trend them forward without taking into consideration any of the plan changes or any.
See if it
Yeah,
works.
and it wouldn't at all take into consideration whether the experience had gotten better or worse. It is claims from 2 years ago, just straight trended forward.
So that doesn't sound like a very accurate estimate.
No, and it's not. I mean,
And so that's where this $5 million
That's-
savings that Mr. Dwyer's using, this $5 million down at the bottom, under the Cigna?
That's the bottom number, right.
Yeah, and that's
So-
not a very reliable number.
No, but I'll go through some much more reliable numbers with you, you know.
Okay.
So I'll just go back up to the top and
Sure.
finish the
Yeah.
rest of the town. So we did the 18-19 projection as well, and that comes to 18,644,000, and that's numbers you see on the first page. Now, keep in mind, this is only the medical and the prescription. We didn't include dental, because dental's basically a wash between both plans. So the 18,644,000 would be 16,038,970 under the state plan. That's a savings of $2.6 million.
That's a more accurate number.
That's a more accurate number for the town side, yes.
Yeah, okay.
With the same assumptions, but it's only 1 year.
It's only 1 year, right. And I'll show you how that can change, because that's a projection that we'd make now for 18-19. So if you want to, go
Can I
down.
ask a question on that? Would
Sorry.
the number on the Board of Ed side for 16, 17, that would be an accurate number, right?
The top piece of this is the number that we initially projected. You'll see the experience period used on the left-hand side. So that
Right.
top section is November of 2014 through October of 15, because that's when the board was actually considering the move to the state partnership plan. So that's when we were doing our projection under Cigna and on the cost under the state partnership plan. So at that time, we projected $30,901,000 under the self-insured Cigna plan and $26,212,000 under the state partnership plan. Okay? Now, we have since gone back and asked the state to provide us with the actual claim experience since inception of the plan. That's the second green row there.
Which is
So-
the green row? I'm sorry, ours is black and white.
There's a
I'm
black
sorry, so
and
it's
white.
the
It's
middle
the-
middle
Middle
section
one.
here.
It's the middle,
Okay.
the middle of the bottom section.
Yeah.
So the 25,803 is the actual.
No.
No.
Well, the actual under the state plan was 26,401. And the premium would have been 25,830. Okay, so when we initially projected a $4.7 million savings, actually ended up being $570,000.
Say that one more time. What was the initial amount we thought we were going to save?
The top number, the $4,689,000. And the way we got the $30,901,000 was we took the prior 12 months of claims and projected them forward at, 7%. And then they made the switch to the 2.0 plan, and instead of the claims coming in at $30,901,000, they came in at $26,401,000. Now, keep in mind, I can't really tell you why that wild swing, quite frankly. We evaluated both plan designs,
Yeah.
and the state's plan is actually a tiny bit richer than the plan that the board had under Cigna. So I doubt very much it has anything to do with the plan design. It looks like your experience just got a lot better.
So the savings wasn't that much.
No,
It was the 570,000.
it was $570,000.
But Mr. Dwyer's trying to tell us we should go around and thank and kiss teachers for saving us $5 million from going
Now
to this
that's-
plan.
yeah, now-
And that doesn't seem to be a very accurate number.
Right, well,
Number one, we didn't get the savings we thought we were going to get.
That's-
That's $4 million, and he thinks we should be championing this all around.
Right.
And I think we
That's-
should bring him at a table with you so that you can exactly explain this to him.
Right.
Because I don't think he understands these numbers.
Keep in mind, Mr. Walsh, that's just for the 16-17
That's
policy
fine.
year.
But
okay?
they're still talking about that savings, and it turned out not to be true.
Right.
They're championing that savings at the $4.6 million
Right.
to this day.
Right.
So the reason it's not true is why? It's because the experience was at 26 as opposed to 30?
No,
right.
Yes,
Yeah.
right.
Right.
The-
So
the
the
actual
experience came in, what basically happened
Claims
was,
payment.
you had, the year before, you had $26 million in claims.
Yes.
And then the year after you switched, you still had $26 million in claims. So
Yes.
while we thought it was going to go up 7-8%, it stayed completely flat. And it has happened on the board side before. I've been working on the board's account for probably 11 or 12 years now, and it's happened probably 2 or 3 times where they have a year that is just completely flat.
So the Board of Ed is working off the projected numbers, not the actual?
I don't know what
Well,
I don't know what they're working off.
I know.
Basically, everybody, when the Board of Ed made their presentation, the Board of Ed indicated that they had this number.
The 570 number?
The $5 million number, you probably remember
million?
that. If you remember at the time, there were some comments, I commented, I think members of your board commented, that that number might not be a real number because of all the variables and the assumptions that have to go into building that number. So what we asked Aon to do was say, well, just go back and look at what 1 year, because the only clear year we have is the the 2016, 17 year, where we know what premium we paid, and we know what the actual claims cost was, and that year shows the 570. I'm not sure, when we met with, when I say we, Aon, myself, and Mr. Hipson, met with Ms. Mansell the other day, and we went through all this and explained it to her, and she understands.
Okay.
We'll probably bring them back again before we vote and talk about it, because they're putting out these false numbers. They're
Well,
false.
the real numbers,
They're-
you just can't.
They're
it's
false
just-
numbers.
Yeah, there's,
And they're using it as a
Interpretation.
justification for them giving them an 8.2%.
Excuse me, I think Mr. Mayor just explained that they didn't have the numbers at the time.
And I'm being interrupted.
Mis-
You'll have your
A
chance to
point of
speak.
order to
You'll
use
have your-
language
you'll have
like
your chance to
false
speak when you-
numbers
when
is
you have
out
your
of
chance to
order.
speak, Ms. Marmion.
Mr. Walsh, go ahead.
So I think we should bring them back after the fact, so that we're not trying to market numbers that are not true.
yeah, I think they're scheduled to be back on the 29th? 29th, when they're doing over the enrollment, so you'll have that opportunity then, sir.
Excellent.
Can I ask one
Maureen,
question?
you want
Go
to
ahead.
speak?
And I apologize, I just wanted to call out that I think we should be careful about the words we're using. To say that somebody knowingly threw out false numbers, I'm concerned with that language. I agree we should have the Board of Ed back to talk to us now that we have this drill down on the numbers. Thank you.
And I'd like to respond by saying, I think we really got to be careful, and the board's got to be careful, when they're throwing out savings numbers of $5 million, that they've got to be really accurate, and maybe talk to our consultants that we have here at the table before they start throwing out these numbers.
Mr. Mottola?
So-
And then Ms. Desmond.
So the reason why the numbers the way they are is that they actually had two pretty good years on their claims. They were flat. So the 4 million number is based on the claims going up to like $30 million. Is that correct?
The 4 million number, the 4,000,007 savings is based on what we thought the
Thought was
claims
gonna
were going to
happen,
be.
based on
in
what usually
2016,
happens.
17, based on the prior 12
Gotcha.
months.
Okay.
All we do is take that prior 12 months and project it forward using a trend figure of 7%, say.
Yeah.
Right? So we do that. Now, we don't have the benefit of being able to get utilization data from the state, which would tell us whether there were a significant reduction in the number of inpatient hospital stays, whether there was a significant reduction in the number of large claimants, physician office visits, surgical procedures, all kinds of things that we know that took place the year before, because we have that data. But all the state gives us is, here's the heads by month, here's the claims by month, and here's the premium by month. And that's it.
Well,
Right,
there's
I
laws
think,
for
if
that,
I,
right?
if I may, I think it'd be very helpful if we just skip to the next page.
Yeah,
But
the next-
before we,
the
but
next-
before we do that, so on this page, what we looked at is, we had a projection of 4.6 million. The reality came in, at that time, the claims was 570,000, which was a benefit. And we all know that the town threw out this 2,000,005 number. The next page, I think will be helpful in putting us in a little bit perspective.
Okay, before we go there, did you have a question, Ms. Desmond?
Well, first of all, I want to second what Ms. Marmion said. I would like us to be a little more careful and thoughtful about the way we speak to and about people at this table. So my question is, the number that Mr. Dwyer used came from you, correct?
Initially, yes.
Okay, so he's not an actuarial. He didn't come up with these numbers on his own.
Yep.
Okay, so the idea that they were inaccurate numbers is not, in fact, aimed at him, but at you, not by me.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting they were inaccurate at the time.
Correct.
That's timing.
Well, the $5 million number...
That was the snapshot at the time based on
At what time?
a
No,
formula
no.
you've been using
The-
for a long time.
At what time?
Yeah, how long ago?
No,
When-
the
when they were-
$5 million number is a number that was calculated by Aon based upon a formula that the Board of Ed asked them to put
Oh,
together.
and what was that formula?
That formula was to take the experience, use what the trend would have been, and compare it to the premium.
And is that a very accurate, in your business, as an expert in this area on your company, Aon, is that a very accurate way to do it?
I wouldn't use that number.
You would never use that, would you?
Not personally, I wouldn't use the number.
No. And did you tell them that you wouldn't use that number?
We discussed it. yes.
It was discussed. Did you tell them that that's not a very accurate number to use?
We explained the limitations of that calculation.
Did you tell them it was an aggressive number to use?
Well, I didn't know at the time whether it was aggressive or not. It is, this is the math we used, and this is how we did it. Because that's what we were asked to do.
Okay, but what did you tell them when they told you that's what they wanted to have done? What were like the words you used to them? Did you say that's not something we would normally do?
I don't know if I used that. I cautioned with respect to the calculation.
And despite that caution...
Because I said, look, we don't have any way to tell you whether those claims would continue to trend that way. You're using claim information that's 2 years old and being trended forward for 2 years.
That's what I understand.
So it doesn't take into consideration whether your experience got better or worse. It just takes old claims and makes them current. You know, and we did explain that.
Okay. But despite that, they still wanted you to run that number?
Yeah, that was, they asked us to provide that calculation, yes.
Okay. That says a lot. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, can we go to the next page?
Yes, let's go to the next page.
Okay, so the next page is, since inception of the state partnership plan, we added up all the claims and all the premiums since July of 2016. So the premium totaled, well, for the latest 12 months, we looked at the latest 12 months, which would kind of mirror a policy year. So $26,065,000 is the premium paid over the last 12 months. The claims over the last 12 months are $26,043,000. To that $26,043,000, you then have to add, if you want to compare apples to apples, you have to add an estimated administrative and pooling charge to make it a full cost. Okay? So that cost would then be $28,647,000 versus premium paid of $26,065,000. So if you're looking at just the last 12 months, it's a $2.6 million difference, savings. So even though there's only a $500,000 savings in the first 12-month period, the last 12 months, it's $2.5 million.
Which is pretty much half of $5 billion.
Correct.
Right?
That I do know, yes.
Yeah.
Any questions on this page?
I looked at it every which way. It's from July of 17, it's about $1 million savings, and for the entire period since inception, it's again about $2.6 million.
So there's savings.
There's savings.
All right.
Yeah, there's no question about that.
Okay, is there
And
a question on the
again, you
numbers?
have to look at it by year.
I wanted to go back to the prior page, ask a quick question, not but on the town side. Can I ask a
Okay,
question
on the
that?
town side.
Yeah. Hey, Bob, on the last page, the prior page, so this was the town numbers, yeah, up top. So those would be accurate numbers, correct? Because we have knowledge of what our claims were during that time period?
No, the top number is for the period ending this coming June 30th. So it is based upon the experience through January of 2018, extrapolated forward through June 30 of 18, compared to what we know the state premium would be.
Okay. And, all right, we're gonna have an executive session later, right?
We are.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mottola. Any other comments? Okay.
One other thing, I think we should acknowledge
Thank you very
that
much
there's...
for your assistance on that and your expertise on that. I really appreciate it and explaining it.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
There's actually 3 members of Aon here, and Melina Tolman, who's sitting in the audience, who also works with the town and helps us with these numbers and putting these documents together.
All right, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so now we're going to go to HR.
All right, page 87, Human Resources.
This is great.
Mr. Hibson.
Excuse me, good evening. Emmett Hibson, Director of Human Resources. And My budget begins on page 87.
Okay, any comments before we start?
Sure. I have a total budget of $5,556,806, which is a 2.5% or 2.05% request over last year's budget of $5,445,245. My budget is divided into three parts. Divided into operations, which is about $557,469, or 10% of my budget. Insurance and claims, which is $2,267,324, which is about 41.6% of my budget. And workers' compensation, heart and hypertension, which is about $2,669,091, or 49.01% of my budget.
Okay, so we'll start with operations. Are there any questions, comments on the operations side? Looks like the increase is due to contracts.
Yeah, so 472,000 of the budget of the 557 is in salaries, and there's a 6.3% increase, but that's because two employees were tracking along the PETA. That's 12.6% increases, but again, they're 2% per year, so they are 2% per year increases. So even though it looks like it's 6.3% total salary, it's 2% a year. Other than that, my budget's pretty flat. That takes about 85% of that 557.
Okay.
Any other questions on that?
Yes, Mr. Wall?
Not on that specific matter, but another line on your budget.
Sure.
The fees and professional services are going up 18%. What is the main
So,
drivers of that?
There is, my fees and professional services has a number of different issues. It has a town physician, which is about 17,000 EAP, 5,500, but what is going up is $11,000, and I'm going to be purchasing a software license for an applicant tracking system. Currently, all of our applications come in through paper, and for the most part, the town has been decentralized in its hiring. I mean, the police department takes its applications in, the fire department takes its applications in. We take some applications in for the town, and the libraries take theirs in. We're kind of taking all that back over. We're going to be handling all of the applications coming in and becoming a centralized HR function. So in order to process that and process the applications, we went out and priced a number of different applicant tracking systems, and 11,000 was about the average of the cost. We kind of have an idea who we want to go with, but that's about the average cost. So that's my $11,000 increase on that.
Is that a yearly cost, or is that a software package price you pay one time and it's good for as long as you...
No, it's a yearly cost. It's a, the one I'd like to use is, they maintain all the documents, so it's housed forever. There's no limit on the number of storage capacity. So I've used it in Norwalk. It's a good system. It's a government-based system. It's called NeoGov.
So they store that up in the cloud?
Stored up in the cloud.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my request. I mean, you know, that's, if not, we do it through paper, and quite frankly, it becomes cumbersome managing, you know, oodles of paper and numbers of applications.
Ms. Mary?
So did I just hear that you're going to take, or you are in the process of taking over the hiring for the police and the fire? Is that correct?
We're going to, so they'll still have the hiring process, but we're going to take over the administration of managing the applications, the onboarding process. Obviously, the police commission and the fire commission have the authority to hire. With police, there's specific rules you have to follow through post. Those will all still be followed. They'll still have to go through background checks. They'll still have to go through the polys and the psychs and all that. So obviously, that's still going to be done, but we are going to be receiving all the applications, tracking all the applications, sending out letters to unsuccessful applicants, things along those lines.
So I guess my question really is that you're not kind of taking the place of a person, of an employee on the police or the fire side in terms of their HR, their hiring. In other words, you're not making redundant somebody, an employee on their side, are you, or are you?
No, I mean, they currently use their IA department to do a number of the hiring, so we'll be doing some of the processing. They'll still be doing, as with most towns, the IA departments will still be doing a lot of the processing and background checks and stuff, and they do that for the fire department also. We started that process, I think, this go around with using the police IA to do background checks for fire applicants also. That's going to stay in place. Just the tracking of it, the receipt of it, the notifications to the applicants, that sort of thing. And that's kind of standard with most police and fire departments in the state. We did have a lot of the departments, smaller departments, doing, getting applications, and we didn't find that to be efficient because there was some people would call us, ask us for an application, someone come to us, someone come to the department, things would get lost in there. It was just kind of a cumbersome process. So our plan is to, we've started, quite frankly, taking that over. We haven't done the part-timers yet, but we've done everything else. We've kind of taken that aspect over.
That's the way most municipalities operate, the way you're going.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's...
where I work, that's exactly what they do.
This is the first place I came to where it was decentralized, in all honesty.
Mr. Timniak?
Did you mention town physician?
We do. We have a town physician, does all our physicals, onboarding. Correct.
Is it a private, is it an individual practice, or is it a guy, is it like one of
It's
those
an
trucks which comes in and out?
No, it's an individual that's had the contract for a while, and we've just maintained the contract with him. Quite frankly, it's an extremely favorable rate to the town.
Yeah.
And
Oh, I'm thinking about it. So he would do police and firefighter physicals on location?
he does all our physicals on location, correct. Anything that, even if we have certain part-timers we will require to get physicals, all our DOT, I mean, any town employee we're bringing in goes through them. Any type of DOT, CDL physical he does. So our Public Works, most of them maintain CDL licenses. They're required by DOT to get yearly physicals, and so yeah, he does that.
That's what you said, 17K a year?
17,000 a year. Trust me, it's a good deal.
Ms. Esima?
Just curious, because it's a small number, what was the capital outlay? It was in 2 years out, back in, now it's out?
So it was for a chair, and I
Okay.
quite frankly, I still haven't purchased the chair. It's
Somebody's standing up. And then, if I could, just one more question. So the 11K is for the software is an annual, and that's
That will be an
reflected in that
annual,
increase.
yes.
The reduction in the education and memberships, is that trending down, or is that just a one-year snapshot?
No, that's
of
trending
some-
down.
Okay,
So, correct, that's.
Okay.
thanks.
All right, let's go to insurance and claims.
So insurance and claims, I would like to invite up Rob O'Connor from Peoples.
Okay.
Hi, it's Rob O'Connor, People Can Have Insurance.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Sorry, yeah, no.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to just take you through the insurance and claims piece of this. So we handle the property casualty for the town, and so that includes the property insurance, the E&O, the liability insurance, basically. And so this year, you're looking at, I guess they're looking at page
It's a
89.
12% increase.
Sorry?
12% increase at the line we're looking at? In liability?
Actually,
No, he's got more lines than that. You got property insurance,
yep,
right?
bottom of page 89 is what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
3.19%.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so what we do basically, with property and casualty, the most of the coverage renews on 7/1. So what we need to do every year is estimate, basically. It's quite honestly an educated guess at this point. We really don't know what the real numbers will be until closer to 7/1. So, sometime in May, June, basically, we'll have real numbers. But 61% of the cost of the property casualty program is with KERMA. KERMA handles the property, the liability, and so this year they basically came out and were looking initially they talked about a 15% increase, and that's something that they come out with based on the claim experience over the past 3 to 5 years. We went back to them, and they agreed to reduce that to 7.5%. But in the meantime, we have decided to go out and bid that piece of it out. So we will be looking at several different companies this year on that piece. I mean, quite frankly, we do bid many of the pieces of the insurance. The KERMA piece hasn't been bid in a number of years. So it seemed appropriate this year to take a look at that, especially considering they were looking, it seems like they're looking for what I would consider a higher than what's necessary increase. So,
So how are we doing this year to budget? Would we have that answer, Mr. Mayor, so far? Or is it
What's the line item? Just the premiums?
premiums?
Yeah, premiums were,
I think we're 1% over. So last year I had asked, if you remember, we came down a lot in our insurance number, came down a little bit in our insurance, and what I had done is I had put a kind of a bare bones number in. There used to be as Rob just said, we get proposals at this point. The line's not actually placed until May. So I went in with a number that was pretty aggressive, and when it was actually placed, it was placed right around where we went in, but I want to say there was about a 1% increase in the premium to what we had gone out and actually gotten initial bids because of claim activity.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, on the Kerma piece, last year, they were talking about a 3% increase initially. We were able to negotiate that to a flat increase. So again, that's about 60% of the budget right there on this piece.
Okay, thank you. Questions?
We try to do the same this year. We try to say, listen, if you hold it flat at 0, we'll go another year without bidding it. But
No takers.
they weren't going to take it this year. They did it last year, but they weren't about to. And we had which you'll probably hear in executive session, we had a pretty large claim against us in the fall, and they were just not, quite frankly, they went back to a 5-year review, and just with our claims, they felt uncomfortable keeping it at flat for one more year.
All right, thank you. Mr. Walsh?
On all the insurances, have the limits changed on any of the insurance policies since last year?
Since last year? The only, I would say, tweaking has occurred. We've added a couple of properties for flood insurance, for primary flood insurance, where we felt it was appropriate. The cyber liability actually was tweaked because Kerma actually came out with $1 million primary cyber limit, so we were then able to layer an excess over that, so we reduce the cost of that line. So tweaking, but really no significant increase in limits.
Okay, so the cyber is how much?
The cyber limit is $5 million in total.
Okay.
Kerma provides the first $1 million, and then there's a $4 million excess policy.
Okay, because we take credit cards in at different locations, correct? So if like any of that information got out and we had to do notifications and somebody would come in and that insurance would pay for like a team to come in, find out how it happened.
Exactly.
They'd send out all the notifications to everybody in every state pursuant to each individual state's laws and all that, because that gets terribly expensive.
No, yeah, that's absolutely right. It's a good description, actually. That's exactly what that's much of what you're paying for, is the response.
Yeah, some of the business I work with, that's become a big thing. The business I'm working with, it's just like, it's become a huge...
It's become a huge line item for towns.
Yes.
For any large organization now, cyber liability has become, necessary, important. And I think a $5 million, the town was I think, smart in that they didn't just buy $1 million, they bought $5 million.
Yes.
And I think that was a prudent decision.
Okay, so none of the limits have really changed other than what you mentioned. How about any of the deductibles? Any of those change?
No, I mean, the program that we have currently is what I would call a high deductible program. So the property and the errors and omissions lines have a $100,000 deductible.
Yes.
And then the auto general liability lines have a $500,000 deductible. So, that by doing that, because the town's able to absorb those types of deductibles, you keep the cost down, and that's worked fairly well. Again, we're going out to bid on that this year, so we're going to relook at all that.
So we have a $500,000 deductible on a car accident case?
Liability case, yes, correct.
So if a police officer is not operating in proper tolerances and runs over a schoolyard of kids, we would pay $500,000.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Police chase, anything wrong with
Yes. Okay.
Public Works driver.
Public Works, anything. Okay. Or a town car, somebody going, okay. I think that's all I have for right now. Thank you.
Just one note, it's not important, not necessarily critical, but there's the 41,000 there. It's actually about the line for liability is actually about 7.5% increase. That 41,000 is a redundancy there. So just so you're looking at it, because that 12% looks higher than it really is. It's really about 7.5% on that line.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
On the sports insurance line, is that what you're talking about?
Exactly. It just got, that number is included in the liability line a second time.
Any other questions?
The only other question I have is, do you recommend, or do you see us having to increase limits or anything else like that in the future?
That's been something we've discussed. Last year, we did get a quote on a $5 million additional liability, excess liability policy. And we decided not, it was decided not to do that. It's always difficult, to know what the right limit is. But, if you asked for my recommendation, I would say that the town should consider increasing that by, somewhere in the order of $5 million, at some point, just given, the types of claims that we're seeing, in other towns and municipalities.
Okay.
What would the cost of that be?
I want to say that last year the number was in the $10,000 to $15,000 range a year. So, when you think about a $5 million additional coverage for $10,000 to $15,000, to me that makes sense. But it's not my job to spend the money. I just recommend it. So,
Right.
But that's something that we would again recommend it.
And we wouldn't have touched that this year from the claims that you've seen?
No, we haven't gotten there, but other towns have. So
Yeah. Okay.
It's a thing, right?
Okay.
We've had demands that were close to that, but nowhere near actual valuation of claims. And that's kind of, the valuation of claims have barely touched into our excess currently. So that's kind of what we've looked at. And if you look at what we consider to be our exposure is nowhere near where our excess runs to. It doesn't mean we haven't had some pre-trials where attorneys have come in and have actually penetrated through our excess, because that, quite frankly, happened this year. But there wasn't a number that anyone on our side thought was feasible, quite frankly. So I think that's been what we've considered, we're well below on all the claims. Again, what we consider well below on all the claims for, to warrant spending the extra money to go above our excess, go above our current excess.
But I guess the fear is that we'd get hit for something, and we'd spend $1 million of our own money, and then we'd wonder why we didn't spend $15,000 a year. That's the fear, I guess, right? What do most other towns do in regards to that? Do they get the $5 million access? I mean,
towns are all over the map on limits. I can speak from experience on a couple of towns. Darien, for example, is buying $15 million. I know Stamford, I think, is at 25. So, it depends on a lot of different factors, and size of the town, I believe. So.
And we don't have any, is that?
Oh, no,
what
we
excess
have,
do we have?
we have a $15 million excess
$15 million
program.
excess, okay.
So
You were talking about $5
16 in
million
total.
extra on top of that. Okay.
Yeah, so we have 16 in total, so the 5 would get you to 21 million per claim.
Okay.
Is what we're really talking about there.
Okay. Ms. Sezema?
So flood insurance, structures only, correct?
Yes.
And that's based
Well,
on the...
no, I'm sorry. It includes contents of structures as well.
Okay, and currently our rates are based on the latest FEMA maps?
Right.
And how often do those change?
So the way the flood program works is we have, KERMA provides flood insurance up to $2 million for all of the properties that they insure, okay? Except if you're in what we call a high hazard zone, okay, an X zone, Penfield Pavilion, for example, is in an X zone. So, and those, they basically have a deductible of 500,000, which is the limit that the federal flood plan provides. So they mirror that, basically. In those cases, what we've done is selectively gone out and decided which properties it makes sense and have the highest potential impact. And then we've brought the federal flood limits for those particular buildings. So, for example, Penfield would be one where we have a federal flood plan for 500,000, then Kerma would come in over that, okay, up to 2 million. On top of that, we bought a $5 million excess flood program. So if, God forbid, there's a really bad flood in town, the town has the 2 million Kerma plus the 5 million excess. So we've got 7 million potentially of flood coverage in that event, which actually is, I think, better than most towns.
Good. But when these maps get redrawn from time to time, it shouldn't really impact the buildings that we're covering now. I mean, it won't add more or...
One of the, flood rates are going up, and I'm sure you've heard, the problems with the flood program. So we've actually budgeted in a 25% increase on our flood. That's one of the reasons that the prices are up. And the two areas I would say that are impacting the increase are, we're being told that the excess liability market could potentially have some rate spikes this year. So there's a 15% cushion this year on the numbers that you're looking at. And on flood, we've got a 25% cushion. Again, we hope that we won't have to actually, we don't know those numbers, but we're being prudent and trying to put that money in the budget. Hopefully the 25% on flood won't happen, but the federal flood program is predicting that will. So that probably likely will happen. They're talking about 25% increases over the next 4 years, and we're in the second year of that prediction. So flood's going to get very expensive.
Thank you.
Have you looked at the buildings that we do use the FEMA flood program on, getting private flood insurance on that? Because I am in the flood zone, and I and many of my clients have gone to the private market for flood insurance to replace FEMA, because FEMA is telling people it's going to be a 25% increase. And I was able to reduce my flood insurance premium by 50% by going with, and it's not like it's like strange companies. I mean, these
Right.
are these are AAA companies. One's Lloyd's of London.
Right.
So because they wanted to get into this marketplace. Now they weren't insuring, I don't think, directly on the water. Like it might be hard to get that for, Penfield Pavilion. But if you were slightly away, a block or two away, you could get it, and many people are going to that. So much so
that is something we looked at, and quite extensively. We looked at a number of different options for a private program. Actually, Aon was involved with that and helped us with that, and Kerma. It didn't turn out to be, significantly better than federal flood, but I do agree that there are alternatives to federal flood. It's still in its early stages. It's much better, like what you're talking about for private structures is really way ahead of the commercial market at this point.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask you.
But
It's different from
I would
residential
not be surprised in 1 or 2 years from now that the commercial flood market, there's going to be competition to the federal flood plan, which will be a good thing because that plan is not the best.
Especially if they're going up at 25% a year.
Exactly.
Seems to be that there will be a marketplace underneath
There'll
that.
be be private insurers like Lloyd's of London and others who will come in and do a better job and improve it. And the coverage will be better too, because the coverage under the federal flood program it's basically stripped down coverage.
Yeah, and the coverage, you said contents is coverage, but that's above ground level, right? But they don't cover stuff in the basement?
Yes.
They don't, so like town hall, is it a flood zone?
Yeah,
and
we've talked a lot about that.
And if our basement floods, they're not paying for all the stuff below ground there. They're only paying for certain things like water heaters, like certain things that would normally be underground, but they're not paying for contents.
It has to be above ground. Yeah. In fact, that's one of the big issues. Is the police department has they're moving. They're talking about moving that, or has it moved? Yeah. It's being moved, right? Okay. So that was one of our big concerns. Is that would not, none of that equipment would be covered. But once it's moved, it will be. So that'll be one less thing.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to workers' comp. So we,
Thank you for your help.
thank you very much.
Thanks. All set. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor? Over here.
Yeah, actually, PMA is here for workers' comp.
Okay.
Kevin Roach. Kevin Roach. What's his name? Dan Roach.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Don.
No, you stay there.
Yeah, so every year PMA they administer our workers' comp and they administer the claims. And there's a gentleman there, Ralph Melissa, the underwriter, not an actuary, but an underwriter, who does the development, the credibility, IBNRs, and they develop the numbers. The numbers they develop go in the budget. One thing that Dan is going to point out today, when I was looking at the numbers recently, the trends were not looking consistent with what was in our budget and what we had originally projected. And so I asked them to rerun some numbers, and Mr. Roach will go through that.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Dan Roach, PMA Companies, Client Service Manager. I met with Bob the other day, and we went through this. We had some estimates that were done, I believe, in December, and Ralph went through them again back just about the end of the month of February and made some slight revisions upward, I think, both in the town side and then a slight revision downwards for the Board of Ed and heart and hypertension. I think those were the areas that were revised a little bit downward. But those are the numbers that are in front of you. He ran them in, I think, the end of December and then ran again in February.
Okay, do you have the numbers then?
Yeah, we do. So our budget is, the workers' comp budget is broken into 4 pieces. You have 101, which is for claims handling, 20,000, which is workers' comp loss prevention. And so we have, PMA actually sends someone down and does training for our staff for 20,000. It's well worth it. They help us. There's an OSHA claim. So those are 2 of the 3 numbers. Those are fairly consistent. They were given a quote early, we're given a quote, and that's a flat number we pay throughout the year. The 2 numbers that are variables are the numbers that Dan were talking about. One is the workers' compensation number. This year, the projection is actually a decrease from what we had last year of $2,011,000 to $1,973, and the heart and hypertension, is that going from 600 to 575. So I think Dan just kind of addressed the workers' comp was reviewed by Ralph, and that's where he sees the trend going. And then the heart and hypertension, I will say, is something that you see trending downward because just the fact that the statute changed many years ago, fewer people are subject to it. Quite frankly, that number we could beat or we can get beat on, and one large claim can hurt us, but the fact is, as you've seen, our claims are going down year over year, and we haven't had a catastrophic claim on that. And the number of people that are subject to that obviously reduce every year also.
So what number was going to be?
Yeah, just a couple clarifications. Number one, you mentioned Board of Ed, but all the claims are on the town budget. There's none on the Board of Ed side. So in the budget book, where you look at workers' comp, you'll see the original workers' comp, the total number, which is then town plus WPCA again, right? It's split out. The original number was $2,057,000. The revised recommendation is $2,172,000, or an increase of $115,000. And the heart and hypertension is the estimate for the heart and hypertension for next year stays at 575, unchanged.
So the budget book said as a total $2,094,000. That's going up to $2,172,000. Am I looking at this right?
Yeah, well, part of it being on the WPCA side in their budget, so that's why.
It's kind of like the healthcare
That's why you
thing.
don't see that number.
Got to put all the pieces
specifically.
together again.
So it's, a breakout.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, questions?
Can I say, on the heart and hypertension, is under that revised statute, does that run out at a certain point where there's no more claims?
Well, it doesn't run out where there's no more claims. It runs out eventually where there's no more claimants.
Claimants, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
so
they age out or die.
Correct, they'll die. At
They'll
some
die.
point,
Okay.
they'll,
They'll die.
yeah.
Okay. The people
The
that,
statute stopped being effective for individuals hired after 97.
yeah, that's what I was trying to talk about.
And so anyone hired before that can show they had a physical, there's a presumption that they are covered, presumption that any heart-related issue is work-related. For anyone hired after that, they're not subject to the H&H statute. So anyone that's retired, anyone that has a claim, their claim is good until they die. Anyone that's retired and they haven't got it within a year, they're done. And anyone that's still working that was hired before the statute date is still an exposure to the town. As long as they had a physical before they.
Okay, thanks.
Which they all did.
Hi, my name is Dawn Warner. I'm the Regional Manager of Client Service for PMA. I just wanted to just kind of echo what Emmett just said. The actual statute change was 7/196, so anyone hired, yeah, that's okay. Anyone hired prior to is eligible or can, file a claim, and that's where most of your exposure is, and that's what your costs are. So that will eventually fade out as people age out and die. And a lot of, with heart and hypertension, a lot of what you see is what you're paying for is maintenance, prescriptions, once or twice a year visits, testing, so.
Okay.
I just want to be clear that it's they still can get claims after they retire, correct?
They
One
have to be
year.
actively employed at
When
the
they make
time
the
they're
claim?
filing
When they make the claim?
Correct.
Okay. But then it can continue,
Absolutely.
Once it's established.
once it's established
They
during their
maintain the
active
benefit
years.
for their until they die. So if they're on maintenance drugs, which most of your claim is in maintenance drugs, if they're on maintenance drugs when they retire, or even after they retire, if they had a claim, a hypertension claim prior to retirement, then they have that until they die, for as long as they're on the medication.
But you can't retire and a month later realize, oh, I think.
A month later, I believe you can. I believe you have the same as workers' comp, a 1-year
Oh, okay.
period to look back from, to file. Actually, correct. If it's diagnosed a month after they retire, then no. But if it's diagnosed before they retire, they have 12 months in which to bring a claim, as long as they can show the injury date was prior to the retirement date.
Retirement date, okay, thank you. Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board?
Can you spin that cup around so I'm not looking at the FP?
I'm not asking, I haven't asked for the public to come up. I guess I'm supposed to, right?
Yes.
Anyone back there like to come on up, comment? Okay. All right, any other questions? Then thank you for coming.
Thank
For your assistance.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, here we go, Internal Service Fund.
And Mr. Mayor, this $150,000 change, 115, I'm sorry, I wrote the number down wrong. So $115,000, that'll also be in your numbers of potential adjustments?
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to confirm. There you go, Jack.
Okay, Mr. Mayor.
All right. You have a 3-page document, I think, I hope. The first page, the operative number on this page is on the far right column, the third number from the bottom, which is basically the balance that goes into our CAFR, which is the sum, positive and negative of workers' comp reserves, liabilities, legal liability claims, and medical claims, and for 17, the Board of Ed medical claims and the town medical claims. And you can see that if you go down to the third line from the bottom going across, the risk management has a negative balance of $6,804,000. Town active medical, a positive balance of $5,952,000, and the Board of Ed had a a negative balance of 25,000 for a total to the town. The reported number in our CAF for our annual financial statements was $876,793. Going to the next page, you see the that $800,000 number, again going straight to the last column, goes up by about $500,000, it's about $497,000. That $407,000 is primarily, as you can see, going up the fourth line from the bottom in the risk management side. We had the budget for claims was $662,000. We are currently, for legal claims, we're currently projecting that to be $1,042,000. We had a couple of big cases that got, one big one that got paid out already, that hit us for about $400,000. We also, on the as I mentioned earlier, there's also a deterioration, not a deterioration, but the claims activity on our workers' comp side seems to be running high, so that's included in here. And we'll, of course, at the end of the year, look at the reserves and look at that number again. But as of right now, that's our estimate. So the estimate for the year-end 18 is at $1,373,000. And then flipping the page for the projected for 19, for next fiscal year, if the current numbers in the budget, that would improve by $144,000 because, as I mentioned earlier, when we went through the healthcare budgets, when we updated the experience through the through January, that showed an improvement total of $144,000. Well, actually, $120,000. There's also, if you go back to the middle page, you see that the Board of Ed had a $25,000 fund balance. Well, you see the $28,000. Well, forget what I just started to say. But you see the Board of Ed is gone off of there, and
On the set,
so the Board of Ed now is fully funded, so there's no more Board of Ed. And so if the bodies voted on the healthcare budget as in the budget, there would be 144 improvement. If town bodies do what they normally do, which is adjust the healthcare to what the final information is, then we'd basically stay at the $1,373,000. There's nothing in the budget to strengthen this reserve. We just keep budgeting it, and we have some good. We've had mostly good years. This last year because the workers' comp and the legal, the big legal hit being the major, impact.
Mr. Walsh?
Was that $400,000 hit, the bicycle claim by Lake Mohegan?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That was 400,000?
416.
416, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Okay. Any other questions on the internal service fund? Okay, moving on then. Human resources, that ties up human resources, huh? Is correct, that's what I'm saying. We're set, so Mr. Lesser. We're on legal, page 81.
Now, this legal is the attorney fees expense, not the claims expense.
Right.
Which we discussed in executive session.
Good evening, I'm going to recuse myself from Mr. Lesser's budget because we occasionally do some negotiations. I don't want to think people to think that I might be cutting him because he's not negotiating with me correctly.
Such a big deal.
Or that I'm giving him more money to settle with me more.
Yeah,
So
I
I'm going
get
to step
that.
out of the room.
All right, Mr.
And,
Walsh.
you just let me know on that.
Sure. Okay, welcome, Mr. Lesser.
Good evening. So my request is 420 this year. Last year, my budget was 412. Basically, what we did was we took the three main categories, we took the three-year average of 15, 16, and 17. We added in the employee/labor budget of $75,000 and then a $20,000 contingency, which is where we arrive at the 420.
Ms. Merriam?
Hi. Can you tell us where we are to date with legal fees, how we're
To
tracking?
date, we've spent $275,000. So we're about on track to hit the budget.
We are, that was my next question. So
Roughly,
you think
yeah.
we're going to,
I mean, you can never tell, but it looks like we will be right around the budget.
anything that's been out of the ordinary in terms of what you've been handling?
No.
Pretty standard year for you?
No. Not this year.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Timniak?
Can I ask what our per hour rate is?
The maximum that we pay normally is $200 per hour, so it's, I think, maybe between $165 and $200. There are a couple specialties where it goes higher than that, but we always, at least when I'm involved, we always get a discount, some discount off the normal rates.
All right, thank you, Mr. Timniak. Mr. Baker?
I think you normally provide a little bit more of a breakout in the areas from the previous year.
There was a handout. I don't know if you got it. There's no handout? Okay, so I can give you the categories are general, and that's at $165,000, litigation, $125,000, tax appeals, $35,000, employee/labor, $75,000, and all other, there's a 5% contingency of $20,000.
Okay, Mr. Becker?
Yeah, perfect, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right.
May I ask a
Ms.
question?
Marion?
And when are we coming up for housing reevaluations for appeals, all that kind of good stuff? When is that?
The last revaluation was in 2015. It's for a 5-year period.
5 years.
So normally, you get the most tax appeals in that year because whatever you do that year, it carries through for 5 years. If you appeal the next year, you're only going to get 4 years benefit. If you appeal this year, you only get 3 years. So they typically drop. We had very few tax
Last time.
appeals this year.
Yeah.
And we were very surprised, quite frankly, in 15.
Thank you.
Mr. Mottola?
This is probably a stupid question. Do we have an assistant town attorney?
No.
Okay.
Not any official system.
Not- okay,
Not
thank-
that's on the
thank you.
payroll like we used to. No.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Lesser? Okay,
I'll see you in a few minutes. I
See you
guess
in a few minutes.
You're going to have executive session.
we are.
I'll stick around.
We're just going to go to unemployment, compensation, page 170. Can somebody, thank you. Can someone get Mr. Walsh? All right, thank you. Okay, page 170. Let's see. Unemployment minus almost 27%.
Went down almost 27%.
Right.
Yeah,
I
so these are generally projections. We look at 4 months or so of actuals, and the rest are projections. And in 18, the Board of Ed thought it was going to be doing a layoff. So what you do is you look at the you estimate what salaries are going to be, what positions are going to be laid off, and you estimate what you think you're going to be paying for unemployment. So that was done in 2018. There was an estimate that it was going to be an extra 117,000. So the total estimate was at 280. There was a cut to that because the 280 was a pretty high number of 75, and the budget number came in at around $207,000. This year, we're not anticipating any layoffs. We're going back to the basic, what we generally see as trend, which is around 150,000. I think, and we're staying with the 150. We're not seeing any. We don't think we'll see any abnormal activity.
Okay.
So
So it's an
it's-
average.
It's an average. Basically, the state, and quite frankly, you get billed by the state, and they calculate what it is. Someone files. It could be someone that, gets let go from here. We can contest it. Let's say we think the person retired or resigns. They say it's constructive discharge. We challenge it. The state can say yes or no to that, and you can go to hearings on that. Someone can leave here in good standing, resign, go to the next employer, end up getting terminated or being out of work for being laid off, and then we would be hit for that. So the state has a formula they use, and they send us a bill, and we quite frankly pay what they send us.
The questions from the board? The only question I have is on part-time employees.
Yes, they get it. Poll workers get it. If a student comes in and works in the summer and goes to college, they can, I'm on TV, I shouldn't be saying this, but they can file.
Lifeguards.
Lifeguards can go and file. Anyone can file. They can bring a claim. The state will determine whether, in fact, because the position, quite frankly, we hire the lifeguards. You could argue that they left. Well, the reality is we stop. We're not. We lay them off. At the end of the summer, we don't maintain lifeguards. So they go away to school. They can technically file a claim.
So even though
nurses, if they're hired by a Board of Ed nurses, if they're employed by the town and not by the Board of Ed, are eligible for filing over the summer. Board of Ed employees are not. There's an exemption in the statute for Board of Ed employees. There is no such exemption in the statute for part-timers. We have had poll workers. I don't know if I've had a poll worker file here. I've had poll workers file in other towns. Now, what you're paying on it is next to nothing because the poll worker gets paid $100 a per diem rate, but they can file.
Yeah. What do they collect on that?
Whatever the statutory, they'll get a percentage based off of. I mean, it won't be much, but people file. I mean, you'd be surprised.
I guess, it is what it is. I just don't understand. You know you're hired for the summer. That's the job. We don't have lifeguards in December, right? So they file anyway, and they win. And I just don't get it, but
that's the way the law is written. And as people have, if you work for the Board of Ed and you're under the town side, then you're eligible to collect, even though you're on a 10-month employment. That's just, if you transition them to Board of Ed employment, there is an exemption in the statute for Board of Ed employment, in which case you don't collect.
Right.
So the people at the golf course, do they file every year?
Quite frankly, I don't track who files. I mean, I can look at that. Just not something I've done. But if you want that for next time, I can start looking and see who files and what the claims are. But
so
I'm just wondering about the position. So
but technically, the statute reads that the position ends. So if we lay you off,
yeah,
right. So if you a durational employee or not is irrelevant. If we lay you off because of lack of work, you're eligible to collect on the statute. There's a cap on how much you can collect per week, and it's based off of the number of weeks you earned, 52-week. They could be other employment could be involved, and they would tax other employers also. I mean, it's
okay. All right. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
How long has it been the case that you can collect retroactively from a previous employer? I mean, that's an old
I've
law.
been a lawyer for 18 years, and it's been that way for at least 18 years. There's probably a couple of guys here that are lawyers longer than me, and they could probably, if they do.
Thanks, John.
Thanks.
For at least 18 years.
I don't want to have to point out Stanton in the back.
Because you have that FP cup.
All right, so the answer is for a long time. Any other questions on unemployment? Okay, thank you very much. Can I have a motion to go into executive session? Mr. Mottola, can I have a second? Mr. DeWitt? Okay, we're going into executive session, so we'll stay right here.
And we'll leave.
Yep.
Leave. Let me just wrap up and I'll get out.
I'm going to make how about a 3-minute break?
Okay, can I have a motion, please, to come out of executive session? Mr. DeWitt, second, Zezima. Okay, we're back in public session. Do we have any other comments, questions? Let's review the
So,
schedule.
There's no meetings next week. 3 meetings next week are, well, we didn't need snow days. I don't know how we didn't need snow days, but we didn't need snow days. And
That was pretty
potentially,
clever, not scheduling that meeting on that Tuesday.
thank you very much. I know, that worked out well for us, right? And potentially the next meeting, and I think it's a high potential now, will be, that's right. The next meeting is 3/24. And then after that, 3/29, it looks like we're going to have some feedback. I'm sorry, some department heads have to come back with some information on 3/29.
Are we going to vote that night? You don't think so? 29th?
Depends on the Board of
It
Selectmen.
depends if we have any information from the Board of Selectmen.
We'll know beforehand if we
Yeah.
anticipate we're going to vote.
Yeah, they're meeting on the 22nd, I think, and they may or may not vote on that day, right?
Their official voting day, I thought, was the 26th.
That's what it says here.
26th.
If they can vote, I mean, if they can vote earlier, that would be much better for us, because as soon as they vote, then we can get the data, and your department can take more than 5 minutes to roll up all the other stuff we need, right?
Yeah, we're going to send out another big package tomorrow, a whole bunch of follow-up stuff.
Cool.
We're going to follow from
You
the
know,
Board of Ed today.
The one disadvantage
I
of
didn't look
this 2 weeks, 4 weeks into 2 weeks, is during this 2-week period, we have to work like twice as fast. Because we got the same level of questions, we don't have 2 or 3 days to get it out, so.
Well, you did a good job.
Yeah, everything's been good.
We got all the information.
You just told me last night you liked more.
I do like it, but that's the downside.
No, I get it. I
But
get
you
it.
have a little. Like when I left yesterday, last night, I went back to the office and did some work to get shit done for today.
Wait till next year.
And I can confirm that because I was following behind Bob because that's on the way to my house. And I thought he thought I was following up to South Hall. And then he went to the gas station.
There was some issue about.
You thought you were going to help him at Town Hall.
The
and then not
SATs?
do this.
I know him that well.
Yeah, there was some issue about the SATs being held the same day as our. Nothing's changing,
I
right?
haven't heard anything.
Disaster.
I sent an email to Tom about it, because I was hearing through the grapevine that our Saturday meeting is at Ludlow High School.
9:30 at Fairfield
The
Ludlow.
SATs were rescheduled there because of a snow day, and so some people were concerned that, I don't know if.
I think they're
Somehow
looking
we're
at
gonna-
potentially going to Fairfield Ludlow Middle School for the SATs and keeping.
If someone's moving.
Okay.
We haven't heard that anything's moved yet.
Yeah, I
So.
haven't either, so.
I don't think they're looking at moving us. I think they're looking at
Moving
the
them.
SATs.
So right now, we're scheduled for Saturday, the 24th, 9:30 at Fairfield Ludlow.
Right.
And then we have a follow-up meeting on Thursday, the 29th.
Yep.
And then it'll be Tuesday, April 3rd.
Yes. Just so we don't have another coffee failure, you're on coffee duty.
And
so.
I'm going to be, unless everyone objects, I was going to do bagels and cream cheese since it's a breakfast.
whatever you want.
Whatever you bring.
Sounds good to me.
You bring a chef to cook behind the stage.
All right.
Emerald?
Very good. Chris, thank you for putting this schedule together. It worked out well. And thank you, everybody. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Ms. Sezema and second, Mr. DeWitt. We are adjourned. Thank you.